With Lululemon, the real gift happens when they're living in it. When you give them the softest loungewear set, the real gift is this. And this. And this. This holiday, Lululemon makes it easy to give a gift that goes beyond. Open the moment. Shop now at Lululemon.com.
Move your career further, faster in just 2 days with a Harvard Professional and Executive Development Program. Advance your leadership skills, craft smarter business strategies, build your network, and transform how you work and think to keep your career moving forward. You'll earn a certificate and can add Harvard to your resume with Harvard Professional and Executive Development. Learn more at professional.dce.harvard.edu/Spotify.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/campaign to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Welcome to Book Talk for Book Talk, a podcast where we deep dive into the writing of your favorite novels.
This is Jack.
And I'm Amy. In Season 2, we explored Sarah J. Maas's A Court of Mist and Fury.
In our post-season content, we look forward to sharing listener feedback we received as well as interviews with some exciting guests. You can also expect to hear some special listener-requested content.
The views expressed by the hosts and guests are entirely their own and in no way represent the thought or intentions of the original author. This podcast is a discussion shared to spark thought and conversation on the characters and themes of this novel.
Though the hosts speak mostly within the constraints of this book, series spoilers may be discussed with or without warning. Explicit language as well as themes of sex, violence, abuse, self-harm, and depression will reoccur throughout this podcast. Listener discretion is advised.
On this week's episode, we have our friends Erica and Caroline, co-hosts of the Pithy Chronicles, joining us to talk about ACOTAR and real-world folklore sources that may have influenced Sarah J. Maas's stories and characters. Thanks so much for joining us, Erica and Caroline. We would love for you to introduce yourselves really fast.
Well, hi, I'm Erica, one of the co-founders of the Pithy Chronicle. And we are so excited to be here today. We have done just a lot of research on this. I was the bad influence or great influence, however you want to think of it, who got Caroline into ACOTAR. And I told her, I was like, listen, we have to be on this podcast. We have to reach out. This is just absolutely the best thing ever. And she was like, okay, Erica, like, I trust you, but, you know, we can't go half baked into this.
Caroline here. I don't recall telling you that I trusted you.
Well, you can introduce yourself now and say your half of the story.
So hi, I'm Caroline. We're really excited to be here. And it's been an interesting difference between Eric and I because I had not read ACOTAR before getting ready to do this podcast. And now I am 4, maybe 5 books in, and I'm working my way through. I'm enjoying it. I think it's great. And occasionally I'll text her and be like, oh my God, is this really happening right now? And then we'll kind of communicate. So it's been fun, but I've been reading with like 3 cheerleaders who are like, did you get to this part yet? Did you get to this part yet?
I understand that completely.
But because I knew we were going to do this podcast and do these historical connections, I've read it with that from the very beginning, which has been fun, and I think slightly different than how most people would approach this book.
Oh, yeah.
So I hope we can bring something different.
Thank you both so much for joining. If anyone might have missed it, we were on your podcast in October where we talked about Twilight, so we are really excited to have you both here for today.
Yeah, listen, the vampire discussion for our Spooktacular was absolutely some of the most fun I've had doing the podcast.
Agreed.
It was, I mean, I just had never thought about it, and now I want to go back and read and watch all of the vampire everything in my catalog just to be like, Jack and Amy said. Jack and Amy said.
But what I really liked was that different lens and looking at it from a very like feminist and kind of
a little more academic too, you know,
and in a positive way.
Thank you. I love how you guys are like hyping us up. Summary, we're like eating's masturbation. Like it was.
That had never occurred to me before, and now
Academia.
because I'm reading ACOTAR. After that discussion, I'm like, oh my God, stop feeding the woman. Let her eat in her own damn time.
Yeah, she can do it by herself. Leave her alone.
So when we talked to you about doing this episode, this notion of how to find history and references within the literature, and there's so much, was kind of daunting and overwhelming. And at the same time, I have two little kids, and they've been really into seek and find books. And it's where you stare at this overwhelming, complex picture, and then you find these cleverly hidden items. And so as I was doing that the other day, it made me think about this episode. And I thought, okay, well, reading ACOTAR feels to me like a literary game of hide and seek. And so with every new name that I come across and every reference, I just found my mind sifting through a Rolodex of historical references and options. And it created this really exciting and elaborate world of interwoven references and hidden meanings, even a lot of foreshadowing if you know where to look for it. So that's kind of what we thought we would do for today, was show you just the little snippets that we found and highlight things we thought were really interesting in this literary hide and seek.
Breadcrumbs, if you will.
Yeah.
That's such a great comparison. And, you know, people don't really have that going into books a lot of times. And the fact you knew that that was like the goal.
It was cheating because I knew it was the goal. But still.
Also, like, no one has that as like the first time read with ACOTAR.
Mm-hmm.
And that's such a fun experience.
It was. I really liked it from that point of view.
So after we delve into the individual myths and explore our fun, maybe intentional, maybe not connections made by Moss, then we'll do some extrapolating, which I excel at. But we wanted to make it clear that we are not saying that these things are patterned out with specific connections. We kind of want to present them and let our listeners kind of decide how they play into it. We don't want to say that, yes, this is absolutely what she was thinking, because obviously this woman is a bit of a mastermind, Taylor Swift reference. And so we can't know what she's thinking, what she's weaving in her mind.
But as we talked about, it doesn't always have to be what she's intending. It can just be automatic connections that the brain makes when they see something or hear something that immediately tells them, oh, a white horse, this character's good, is like a very basic example.
Like
and
tropes.
So tropes. And so historical tropes are just as important, or there's a lot of Greek mythology and things in here too. So they might not have been intentional, but I think that she probably would have those references for herself as well.
And that's always the question with authors, right? Like how much of it is intentional and how much of it is, we kind of just call it like talent in a way. Cause like you have to be.
We just call it talent. That's awesome.
Well, cause it's like, that means you have to have been well versed in what is popular and what is historical so that you can pull these things out. And one of the ways that she did that was by using Beauty and the Beast as a reference. So as we all know, A Court of Thorns and Roses is loosely based off of the Beauty and the Beast fairy tale. But I understand that it's not the Disney version. Like there's no musicals to this part.
It's so unfortunate.
If only.
If ACOTAR could be a musical. What is the source of Beauty and the Beast and your personal favorite parallels between the original fairy tale and Thorns and Roses?
Yeah, you're right. There are no singing pieces of furniture, and there's no Gaston, which was for me the saddest distinction between the Disney movie.
I mean, Tamlin is
Gaston.
No, Tamlin is, but not in the story. So that's an interesting comparison to think about in some ways. That in the original fairy tale, it's not there, and she's added it back in. So novelist Gabrielle Suzanne Barbeau de Villeneuve published it originally in 1740, and then it was abridged and put into a children's series a few years later. And that's what most people know, this abridged children's version. But the original one is actually much closer to what Moss does with her ACOTAR. And obviously there are many variants around the world today. I found an operatic version, which I didn't know existed. I got kind of excited about that.
Oh.
While the story was written down in the 1740s, the story, the trope, the themes are more than 4,000 years old. So ACOTAR is joining a very long line of very exciting literature. So Moss's version really does follow it very closely. And like Feyre's father, Belle's dad is a wealthy widower merchant whose fortune was lost at sea, forcing him and his now 12 children to move to a tiny cottage in the woods where they have to work for a living. It's just awful.
12 children?
Yeah, holy cow, right?
6 boys, 6 girls.
Oh.
Only Feyre or Belle in the original version takes this in her stride. One day, the idle merchant happens upon an abandoned castle, and though its dining room is miraculously laden with food and drink, back to that food is masturbation thing, he decides to literally make himself at home and decides to move into this castle without questioning, like, why is there food here? And it's abandoned.
That seems so very male.
It's so male. Like,
it just sounds like a very man thing to do. Like, oh, there's food clearly written for me. What he found was the audacity. But all right, let's continue.
No, that's true. Well, the next day, he's picking a bouquet of flowers for his youngest daughter, Belle, and a hideous beast confronts him, roaring with rage. He's super pissed off that he provided him with a castle when needed. He fed him, and then this guy's like still stealing his flowers. Like, move on, dude. So ACOTAR is definitely, you can see this scene of confrontation within ACOTAR when Tamlin bursts down the Archeron's door and forces the family to kind of cower in fear. You can really feel that continuance there. Mm-hmm. But the original tale paints the father as the guilty party or the thief. And I think this is an interesting change. He is the one who has stolen something, and he shamefully trades his own freedom for that of one of his daughters. And Belle, the martyr, is the only one who agrees.
I love that because I would say that it's similar because what he sold now was his ability to take care of his child. So
I like that. Yeah.
You're saying that like that Belle's father got them in the predicament because he was the one who, went to the castle and everything. Well, he stole Feyre's childhood and being able to be a kid.
like that. That's a nice thing. I had not noticed that or thought about that.
Caroline, didn't he was a merchant or what have you, and didn't he lose his fortune in a shipping vessel incident? Wasn't that in there?
Yeah, it was a tempest that took down his entire fleet with all of his money and wealth.
Just straight from the source, Sarah. Wow.
Straight from the source. Moss did not make any bones about that. And there are a couple of other things that come in that are just, identical when you read it as a reinterpretation. So Mr. Archeron certainly doesn't offer to take Feyre's place as Tamlin's prisoner, but he also didn't offend the beast by killing the wolf. So I think that's like that slight distinction, but I love how you're saying he gave up his ability to father her and care for her.
Well, and it's interesting, too, that Feyre is the one who ends up killing the wolf Andress in the very first pages of ACOTAR, which is an interesting parallel between Little Red Riding Hood, which is a whole other thing we didn't bring up. But she's only missing her red cape.
Now we did. Way to go. No,
sorry. But I do, for the Throne of Glass people, have to bring up that there is very much that red cape, that Red Riding Hood in Manon Blackby, Corcoran.
Oh. Okay. All right. I'll have to go back to that.
Belle offers to be the martyr, as always. She returns with the beast to this lavish castle. She is showered in gowns and jewels. There's delicious feasts for every meal, a huge library for her to read, and basically you exchange books for art supplies, and there you are. It's pretty obvious.
Sounds very on the nose.
The beast asks Belle to marry him. So this is a little bit different. I think that he's more upfront.
Yeah, the beast at least tries.
The beast at least is honest. He's like, hey, you want to get married? Let's do this.
You want to do this
the beast
regularly?
Makes effort. Like, oh, if I'm supposed to break the curse, maybe I should, I don't know, do something.
It's such a struggle to be a man, you know?
Oh, so hard. Yeah.
So hard.
So every night she refuses because, yeah. And then she dreams about a handsome prince instead. Then she becomes desperately homesick, and the beast loves her and allows her to return home. Again, we can see this very easy link when Feyre goes back, and she discovers that, shockingly, her father has recently come into a lot of money. So again, really nice comparison with this family's changed fortunes. Belle does eventually return. Her 6 bloodthirsty brothers come after her, and they want to find the beast and kill him, despite the fact that he's done nothing to her and that he hasn't in any way been dangerous. She tells him she loves him. She agrees to marry him at the last minute as he's dying, and magically he becomes the prince. The really interesting thing about it is the end. The beast tells his story, which I think we will all hear sounds quite familiar. His father had died when he was young, and that left his mother to wage war and defend their kingdom. An evil fairy was left to take care of him. Why? I have many questions. And then this nanny fairy who's evil tries to seduce him. More questions. He refuses, and so she transforms him into a beast, and only true love, without any of his, princely handsomeness, will break the curse.
So the question I have for Sarah J. Maas is, did Amarantha at any point babysit Tamlin?
Yeah, because she was Tamlin's dad's friend.
Exactly.
Yes, right. Exactly. I mean, that's exactly what I was thinking, because I had just read it as I was writing this, and I was like, oh yeah.
Oh my God.
It's just there. Mom for dad, and we're there.
She really, I love that SJM goes for the, people think, oh, Beauty and the Beast, but which in general, it's sort of similar, but not really. But the really similar parts are the things that we don't think of,
They are the traditional. Yeah. They are not the reinterpretation. She went to the source, which I love.
Well, and 2, Caroline and I were discussing this beforehand. You would typically think of, okay, Feyre is very obviously Belle and Tamlin is the beast and blah, blah, blah. But we know from reading that Feyre doesn't feel like the beauty. She feels like she's the beast in this situation. Or even, with the historical retelling or the historical source, you could see that Rhys is who she's dreaming of at night. Now, of course, the whole transformation thing doesn't really help with that. But it is interesting that, you guys pointed out in a lot of season 1 how Rhys was always there with the lake of starlight and those small little breadcrumbs.
I knew nothing about this original source story or fairy tale from Beauty and the Beast, and I understand that it's actually based on a real person.
Yes, you would be right. So this is my favorite little fun fact that I whip out at parties. You can obviously see I'm great at dinner parties. Okay, so our real beast, quote unquote, was a man named Petrus Gonsalves, who suffered from a genetic condition known as hypertrichosis or Ambrose syndrome or werewolf syndrome. And it's defined by an abnormal amount of growth of hair on any part of the body, right? In excess of the regular amount present in the same people of race, age, gender.
And it is an excess. It's not like this guy's kind of hairy. He has more of a sweater on his back. No. It's a lot.
It is no light dusting. Let's put it that way.
I find it hilarious that it's called Ambrose syndrome, which sounds like Andress.
Yes.
Like the wolf that shot.
The wolf.
Yeah.
Yep.
I can't believe that was a coincidence.
No.
No, it feels really intentional.
Oh my God.
So in Petrus's case, it covered his entire body. So obviously it was an anomaly in the 1500s when he was
especially in the Canary Islands where he was born. I mean, it's not like there's a big population of hairy werewolves walking around.
And so it was off the coast of West Africa too. So I mean, he probably would have been, darker complected underneath all the hair, but there was, honest to God, in the pictures and renderings, no skin to be seen. That's how hairy this man was. And at a young age, unfortunately, Gonsalves was treated as an uncivilized curiosity. He was a wild man captured and put into a cage. And for food, he was given raw meat and animal feed. So, like, horrid conditions.
It's surprising he even survived, to be honest.
It is.
How do you not get sick from... I mean, I'm sure he did get sick from that, but...
I don't know.
Oof.
Like, I kind of slept weird last night, so I just feel very out of sync. I could not manage in the 1500s. It's just like, ooh,
No.
I think my hip's weird.
It's very much like he was one of the original
like carnival curiosities.
Carnival curiosities.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what was
He
that?
was carnival before there was carnivals. So.
That's right. That's right. I like that.
Well, so he was shipped to Henry II of France as a gift for his coronation in 1547. And at the time, in the royal courts of Europe, it was seen as a status symbol to own these, quote, curiosities. Henry II, in the only probably kind move of his reign ever.
Seriously, he was such a dick.
He was kind of terrible. Did not see Gonzalez as like a freak. He was like, I'm not keeping this person in a cage. And he recognized that Gonzalez had a very calm demeanor and decided to try an experiment. So all that kindness out the door. It's an experiment now. So he would attempt to educate and transform this beast into a gentleman. And the boy was given clothes, cooked meals, taught to speak, read, and write.
What a
concept
treat
for a kid.
Oh
Yeah.
my god.
Not
He just
Because
got
he was 10. He was 10 at the time.
Oh my.
I'm just getting
Yeah.
full My Fair Lady
Yes.
montage in my head right now.
I
Yeah.
agree.
With the King
Yeah.
of France and this poor child.
Yeah, because he's 10 at the time, but he was given the education of a nobleman. He could read and write in 3 languages.
If we're thinking about relationships with Akatar, it is interesting to note that he was given by his parents to this life early on, and that they were the ones that neglected his education, if you think about it. And then if you think about Faerith seeing herself as the beast and then being uneducated and going to the court, the night court, and like learning how to read. I mean, you do see this connection. I do not think we can equate Henry II
to Rhysand. Yeah.
No.
I just don't think that's fair to poor Rhysand, but
It's not.
but you can see the Faber connection, and it does make you wonder, did Moss have some knowledge of this trapped beast, this unformed raw material?
Yeah.
Well, so when Henry II died, he kind of left Gonzalez up for grabs. Well, of course,
You mean he
his
didn't
widow-
take particular care to make sure his curiosities went somewhere good when he died?
Right.
Oh.
Right.
Shocking.
Well, his wife, Catherine de Medici, who is one of Caroline and I's favorite people ever in history. She's just so freaking fascinating.
And evil.
And evil.
Yeah,
Yes,
that I
and
was
evil.
hoping that was not the case, but not surprised. All right.
No, evil. Yeah.
She was.
Isn't there a TV show about her called
Yes,
The Serpent Queen?
Yes. Yeah. I haven't
It's
seen it
good.
yet. Oh, is it? Okay, I have to watch
I
it.
liked it. I've liked it. And it's largely pretty accurate, especially when they talk about how her parents died, her connections with Pope Clement. It's really good. It's not what we normally see about her.
Oh.
But anyway, so she was the Queen of France and then ruled through her 3 pretty weak sons. And she dallied with folks like Nostradamus and Mary Queen of Scots and, I mean, just a ton of people, right? So she decided to conduct her own experiment with Gonzalez. She wondered
His
what would
second
happen.
go.
Yeah,
at
of
being
experimentation.
formed. Yeah.
And she wondered what would happen if her, quote, beast married a beautiful woman. And so she found a wife for Gonzalez, a young maiden also named Catherine, who was the daughter of a royal court servant.
And when you look at the second book, you definitely see them talking about what would happen if Faber had a child. What would happen if this creation that was made, what would she produce? And this is what Catherine de Medici was trying to figure out. What will he make?
So they did end up having a pretty decent relationship. They had 7 children, 4 of which 4 of which did have the werewolf syndrome, and they made their living going around, once Catherine died, going around to different courts in Europe to act as, this a carnival of
Not
beasts.
entirely. Before she died, Catherine de' Medici gave away all of the children that were born with this condition as gifts themselves. So, yeah. It's a tragic story.
It's a terrible story.
It's terrible. This poor man. And we don't know what happened to him. We know he died. We know she died. But, they weren't treated like humans despite their experiments.
Horrible. All of it horrible, sad, tragic. I would like someone to experiment with me and sign me up with a beautiful man to see what happens in a marriage.
I would be willing to find out what we could make.
I'm here. Yeah, right? Hi.
I also see a parallel between am I saying it right?
Gonzalez. Yeah.
Gonzalez.
That was not actually his original name.
No, that was the Latinized version. It was Pedro Gonzalez.
Henry wanted to make him seem fancier.
Of course. But I see a connection between Rhys and Feyre, and Rhys being Illyrian and Feyre being human high fae. And are you going to get an Illyrian baby or not?
Yeah. What are you going to make? I think it's a very easy comparison to make with a lot of the different characters and this notion of what does, not inbreeding, but what does
crossbreeding?
Crossbreeding. Thank you. Couldn't think of it.
I guess. Well, and not only that, he's, said multiple times to be the most powerful High Lord in existence, and she's Cauldron born. So, what power, outside of race, what power is
and
that
how
child
handsome
gonna
would they
have?
be?
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. My entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.
Move your career further, faster in just 2 days with a Harvard Professional and Executive Development Program. Advance your leadership skills, craft smarter business strategies, build your network, and transform how you work and think to keep your career moving forward. You'll earn a certificate and can add Harvard to your resume with Harvard Professional and Executive Development. Learn more at professional.dce.harvard.edu/Spotify.
So we're talking a lot about book 2 and Rhysand, and we know that, with book 1 and Tamlin, we're getting a lot of Beauty and the Beast, but with Mist and Fury, that's an entirely different story that SJM is being inspired from. So in this case, with Mist and Fury, it's Hades and Persephone from Greek mythology. What are some of the connections you saw between Mist and Fury and that original tale?
So that original tale has many different versions, as Greek myths tend to, but the basics are pretty much the same, where you have Hades, brother of Zeus, god of the underworld, seeing Persephone, daughter of goddess Demeter, playing with her friends one spring day, and he instantly fell in love. And we're going to just sidestep the whole pedophile watching her play with her friends moment.
Yeah, I didn't realize that she was like a child. I was really rooting for her to be 26 or something. I don't know.
No, I don't think we're going to get a 26-year-old out of this one. No.
It's very equivalent to Reese and Feyre. 500 and something to 20.
You know what?
Yep.
I didn't even think about that. That's
That
valid.
is
That's a
true.
good point. Yeah. So also he was darkness. She was light. We can see that. So he decided to kidnap her, obviously. And so Hades causes the ground under her to split, and she literally falls into his underworld court under the mountain. Like, I mean, there are just so many things you can do with that. Persephone was very unhappy. She missed her friends and her family, but after the Stockholm Syndrome kicked in, and I think there's a lot of cringy aspects within the Beauty and the Beast story as well. I think that's something that clearly Sarah J. Maas is playing with a bit. Well, I find that she's playing with. Anyway, she starts to fall in love with Hades. And so Demeter is back on Earth, scouring the Earth for her daughter. And then when she finally discovers the truth, she's pretty pissed off. And then she causes a drought that kills thousands of mortals. And Zeus goes to Hades and he's like, dude, you got to release Persephone. Like, mom is causing like severe plagues up here. We've got to figure something out. But Hades nor Persephone, frankly, could part. And so in the end, they made a compromise, which sounds oh so familiar. Persephone lived 8 months of each year with her mother and 4 months in the underworld in the darkness with her beloved Hades. So, spring and winter. You see with Persephone going underground, the flowers during winter then reemerge in the spring as a beautiful bud, death and rebirth, split point of view, which we can see as Maas uses later on, and of course, true love, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I would also love to bring up that in season 2, you guys talked a lot about this idea about spring and rebirth and how you can use her descriptions of the weather to kind of use as a thermometer. Sorry about the pun. For her, like, falling in love with Reese and her recovery, which I think is also interesting, given that, you know, Hades and Persephone have such, you know, or Persephone at least has such sway over the weather and seasons, because that's where the Greeks thought, or
well, and you can see Demeter with Tamlin, that when she is taken from her, she causes a huge drought. She destroys things. She throws like physical temper tantrums that you can see as well with Tamlin and how he reacts to having his Persephone taken.
It's also, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but going into like back into like my college years of this, but I believe Hades and Persephone are the only god and goddess couple that are depicted as equals, where they sit next to each other. So
I think you're right.
In a lot of their art, they don't sit. Zeus doesn't give a shit about anyone.
Zeus doesn't give a shit about her, but I think they are seated equally. But he's not a good guy with Hera.
But I do know, I mean, even if they are equal, like, we don't hear stories of Hades cheating on her. We don't hear stories of him hurting women other than like his one main girl. Hades has that bad rep as being like, you know, god of the underworld, but he is also the only one who really treats his partner, his wife, as an equal, unlike everyone else.
I think that's a really great analogy. I had not considered it in that way, but it's definitely true that Hades' character is very honest.
Very much like Reese with Feyre. And then Tamlin being the opposite. So we've had a lot of fascinating origin stories for these novels and a lot of ties between Feyre and Reese and Tamlin. We also saw interesting origin stories in your notes related to Nesta and Reese's names specifically. So can you elaborate on each of the names, what they mean and where they come from?
We had a ton of fun looking up the names. And as we said, this is where you have to extrapolate. You know, Sarah J. Maas has told us that the stories are retellings, but we don't know that she named these people for specific historical characters. We can probably assume she didn't. But Rhysand, I looked up, is Welsh for enthusiasm, or specifically a bundle of joy or a new beginning. And I really think that's very fitting. But beyond that, Rhys, the nickname, So if we take the extrapolation, Rhysand becoming Rhys as his nickname was the name of many of the Welsh rulers. And the Welsh rulers are often misunderstood. They were extremely powerful, but always belittled for just like the location of their court, if you will. And I think you can see a nice connection there. But Erica, say this name for me. The Welsh Rhys, I couldn't do it, and you said it really quickly.
Oh, Gruffwood. Rhys ap Gruffwood.
Rhys ap Gruffwood.
Gryffindor?
So Rhys ap Gruffwood, who fought against invading Normans in the 12th century against England's Henry II, who was husband to Eleanor Aquitaine of Thomas à Becket murderous fame. So he invaded the Welsh lands and stripped Rhys of all of his lands, imprisoned him, and then used him as a bit of a vassal / go-between, similar to a sex slave, so that he could make some deals, but he was still imprisoned during that time. And then when Henry II dies, Rhys actually rebels against Richard the Lionheart, his son, the infamous crusading warrior, and he attacks Norman lordships surrounding his territory, takes the castles, and generally just pisses off the English and says, fuck you, leave my lands forever. So I really like him with Rhysand. I think that you can see a lot of the gumption, and he plans for the future. You know, like he's willing to sit and lie in wait for 50 years as a vassal or a sex slave until it's time to make his move. And when he does make a move, it is aggressive, it's firm, and it's kind of surprising.
It's stuff like this that just makes me feel like, damn it, Sarah, why are you so good?
Oh.
That's what she texted me. She was like, God, this woman's a genius. And I was like, maybe. She has Google.
I don't know. I mean, I would not go like going through every single like Welsh king there ever was trying to find the perfect name and care. I don't know. I feel like she must really like History Channel is what
I think
I've
she
got.
has to really like history. You know, we talked about this a little bit because we saw your TikTok recently, your Stitch, about having that young woman who came up and spoke about the fact that people who like this kind of novel genre are not really literary in some sense, that she thinks it's a bit of a cop-out. And so Eric and I were looking at that, and I said, how can anyone who reads this book and sees even just a small number of the connections that we've found.
Cursory
with all these biblical connections. I mean, just the Beauty and the Beast alone, she tells you this is based on literature. It's not hard. How can anyone do that and think, yeah, no, it's smut? So Erica was like, no, it is smut.
It's smart smut.
I want that to be a genre. Smart smut. You know what? We'll start it here.
Love the smart smut.
I just think it's perfect. And there is no reason you can't enjoy what you read.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that was like a whole thing, you know, is literature just for enjoyment? Well, you can enjoy looking for, you know, literary hide and seek. I enjoy that.
And that's just with Rhys.
Well,
like, that's only his name. There's other characters, too.
Not to mention, there was so much in the, like, the Welsh Great Britain historiography as well as the folklore that we just couldn't fit into this episode. I mean, the Tuatha Danann, the Daglan, the Dagda, and we are going to get into some other things, but like those were things they were too detailed. We couldn't fit in there. But one we did get to fit in there because I am a huge Nesta fan. Woo. She is my favorite. I am obsessed. Like, she's the best. And I was like, okay, but Nesta, that's such a weird name. That's never going to come up with anything.
Wrong.
Oh boy, was I wrong. So there is a nest of Wales, and she is considered to be the Helen of Wales. And we will see why in just a second. So she is daughter of Rhys ap Gruffwood, which is a different Rhys ap Gruffwood, which...
Because you can't have enough of that name. Rhys ap
so
Gruffwood.
Popular.
Exactly.
It was the Michael of its day.
I was going to say the same thing. John Doe.
Well, and she was lover to Henry I, another Henry, and is even depicted in art naked in bed with him. So this was not like hush-hush, secret, like they were lovers. And she bore him a son, Henry Fitzroy. Now, of course, he was already married and had his lady wife and, queen consort. So she, Nest, was married off to an older baron, probably so Henry could secure her and continue to sleep with her.
A very common ploy at the time.
It was. And she was abducted by her second cousin for her beauty and started a civil war. Which is kind of random, but also is kind of reminiscent of when Nesta is targeted for her youth and beauty by the queens once she comes out of the cauldron, things like that. But interestingly enough, Nest is an ancestor of the English and Scottish royal houses, Diana of Spencer, and therefore Prince William, which is just a little nice tidbit. And two, I was like, okay, Nesta, let me think about the name. And it is actually a nickname for Agnes, meaning pure, virginal, and blessed by God. Now, the pure and virginal, I don't know that we can get behind.
How is Nesta derived from Agnes?
I have no idea, but that's what Name Mary told me. I looked into Saint Agnes, and she, among other patronages, is the patron saint of girls, chastity, virgins, victims of sex abuse, and gardeners.
Oh my God. Holy shit. Hold on.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So Nesta is the patron saint of gardeners who take care of Oh my God.
Well, and two, victims of sex abuse, which I think is interesting with her work with the Valkyries and with the library and things like that. And, the name does mean blessed by God, which I also think is interesting she's called Cauldron Blessed and being made and reborn. Vesta is also a related name, but aside from being goddess of hearth and home and marriage, there's not much.
That doesn't feel as Nesta-y.
No, but it's a related name, but and they serve, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, they serve the goddess of three, Hecate. But, as I mentioned earlier, we can't talk about Nesta without mentioning the Valkyries, which literally translates to the chooser of the slain, which, is just badass.
I want a dog just for that purpose. Valkyrie, come here.
Come here. Mine was named Hercules, so I can't disagree. I know.
And he was little. He was so precious.
He was itty bitty. My little demigod.
Yeah, Valkyrie's a great dog name. But these were hosts of female figures who guided half the souls of the dead to Odin's Hall, Valhalla, and the other half go to Freya's afterlife. I'm going to say this wrong, so I'm just going to throw it out there. Folkvanger.
That works.
Sold.
I'm sure that's wrong. I apologize. Of course, too, they traditionally ride Pegasus, which are winged horses, and we see that in their first bonding session, they make with the clouds the Pegasus.
I have to do the worst joke ever. I'm so sorry. And we all know Nesta likes to ride something winged and hunged herself.
Oh my God.
That too.
I can see Amy be like, Jack, we've talked about this as an inside thought. No.
But here it is. It's out there for the world.
It's in the mythology. I can't deny that.
Nesta knows how to ride either way. That's all we're saying. A Valkyrie. Yeah. Sorry, a Valkyrie. Continue. That's right.
We also, of course, get that crossover with Crescent City with Juju Jellybean. Of course, can't leave them out. And interestingly enough, Valkyries are often represented in threes and are associated with the Norns. And boy howdy, are we going to get there, because that's going to be a little bit later when we talk about Greek mythology.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Thank you. I feel like there was a lot that we got from that, and I feel like a better person. Everyone else feels like a dirtier person for that conversation, but I feel great. So a lot of readers don't know this, but Sarah J. Maas might have had inspiration from Beauty and the Beast, but it seems like she almost had more inspiration from Tamlin's namesake. Can you tell us a little bit more about these particular similarities?
I can. I was really excited to find this. And Erica, because she has a Scottish background and is very into her Scottish heritage, which is lovely, already knew of this ballad. So I came at it yet again, I'm behind the 8 ball, like trying to catch up, but I thought it fit really nicely. So there is the story of Tam Lin, and it is a legendary Scottish ballad. In the ballad, Tam Lin collects the virginities of any maidens who pass through his forest. And this is a historical precedent that you can see with the medieval lords who were granted ius primae noctis, or the right of the first night, where they get to sleep with brides on their wedding night. How exciting! Yeah, so... One
then
day,
you have to do that trauma twice with somebody you don't know and then your husband.
Yeah, and that's your first one, is with this dude you've never met who owns you.
I feel like SJM clearly knew what she was doing by making Farrah not a virgin.
Yes, I think so too.
I feel like that was just a big old fuck you to this ballad. I'm following it, but I'm not.
And I love that.
I love that. Because I read it and I was like, whoa, I'm really surprised she's not a virgin. That was one of the first things that surprised me about that tale, because I knew we were looking at a Beauty and the Beast, not knockoff, but certainly a retelling. And so I was super surprised by that. And I do like that notion of like, fine, I'm just not even going to let you have her. I'm taking her.
The prima noctis is a lot like, in my opinion, a lot like Cal and Mai. Like, that's what the two immediately connect to.
Oh, yeah, I can see
me.
that. Yeah. Sorry for derailing you. Yeah, continue.
Do not be. That's the whole point of this. We're all looking for seek and finds. Anyway, one day, a young woman named Janet, or sometimes Margaret, picks one of his special double roses, which is, again, something that is discussed in the Beauty and the Beast original. It's a double rose, and I would really like to know what that is.
It's like a cowlick, but it's got 2 spirals that are right next to it.
Oh, cool. I'll look it up in a second. So anyway, he sees her picking one of his special double roses. You can easily replace the wolf with the rose. And then Tam appears and questions her as to why she has taken what is his. Often in the story, this is the moment when she magically becomes pregnant. We all have questions. We don't have answers. And so she discovers her fate. She, too, was surprised. And she goes back into the forest and looks for herbs to cause an abortion. And I just want to take this tiny little moment to be like, a Scottish 16th century tale is talking about abortions as if it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
And it really, And then in this case, it definitely mirrors this notion of desperation. You know, Farrah is desperate for food. This woman is desperate for an abortion because she's unmarried and magically got impregnated by some man that she doesn't know and has magical powers. So again, she meets up with Tam, and he reveals that he was once mortal. One day he fell from his white horse and was captured by the Queen of the Fairies. According to Tam, the fairies sacrifice one of their own to hell every 7 years as a tithe on Halloween. So Tam fears that this year, it's his turn. The gig is up. He's going to go. So he begs her to save him, so that he could also help her raise their child. I mean, it's definitely not out of selfishness that he doesn't want to be sacrificed.
Tam would never.
No,
Could never.
Could never. No. So she goes through several tests. He says, you have to hold me. You have to pull me off my horse. You have to hold me. And then the Queen of Fairies will turn me into all these evil monsters. And I will look scary and I will want to harm you and I will scare you, but don't hurt me. And then eventually I'll turn into a piece of hot coal that you can throw into the well and then I'll become a human again.
So random.
So specific and so weird. I'm also getting bogey vibes too. Or the
bogey vibes.
The bogey.
I definitely got the mask vibes, you know, like he's masked. What is he really feeling? Can you tell? Who is he really? Will he hurt her? Does he care about her? It's all there.
It's a bogey, not the bog. I've called it the bog this whole freaking time.
No, don't trust me. I'm looking at Amy. What am I?
It is bogey.
It is bogey. Yeah.
Okay. So
I've called it the bog the whole time.
In the end of this tale, the Queen of the Fairies is furious, but she has to acknowledge the defeat. That sounds familiar. And then that's not before, though, she gets the last word, and she makes a final threat against him that makes the young maiden's skin crawl. And then you just fade out with an evil laugh because you don't know what the threat is.
That's shameful.
Was that the original cliffhanger that we've...
The original cliffhanger.
Wow.
Which was actually invented by Charles Dickens. Because he actually left someone on a cliff. That's where that came from. But
nice.
Anyway, so it is very much just this, like, what will happen? And it felt to me like when I finished reading ACOTAR Book 1, I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
No. And I texted Erica, and then I started Googling. So,
and I told her, just don't Google, just be along for the ride.
Yeah.
Bullshit, I Googled. I'm just going to say, like, when I read the end of this Scottish fable, and it's presented in many different ways, song form, like a book. It was originally an oratory experience. And I just went, but then what? What was the threat? What did Amarantha, the Queen of the Fairies, say she was going to do?
Yeah.
So I thought that it was just beautifully connected. And it did inspire also 3 other young adult novels that are also about this notion of female empowerment, as well as like this like catnip of the men. You know, it's all it's smart smut in its own way as well.
So can you tell us a little bit about more? We know from the books, or at least the Court of Thorns and Roses books, that her power is truth. But we also know that SJM got that from somewhere else.
I just want to say that I'm ready for Morgan to have her like day. And I know it's coming, but it's come a little too late. But anyway, that's my personal opinion. Like, I need to know. But in modern Irish, the Morgan is translated as Great Queen or Phantom Queen, and is mainly associated with war and fate, especially with foretelling doom, death, or victory in battle, which we see a lot with her Veritas. And apparently she is this super, super, super powerful being. She's, the one that is supposed to kill Rhys at the end and of a battle if they're not going to win, and then just have her way with everyone. And so I want to know. But she's frequently seen as the goddess of battle and war, also as a manifestation of the earth and a sovereignty goddess. Now, I don't know what that means. I don't know what a sovereignty goddess is, but that's what they told me on the internet.
It's so interesting that she's a queen, because more often gets called Queen Lee or a queen, even though she's not a queen.
And she dresses very regally as well. Like, she carries herself like she is a high fae in this other world.
And she does chiefly represent the goddess's role as guardian of territory and the territory's people. She's also can be a single person, a single entity, or a deity of 3. But there are also a lot of cauldron myths that show up in English, Irish, and Welsh mythology. One of them is Caradwen, and Caradwen's cauldron, which is the half-wraith that's one of Asriel's spies. And Caradwen means white, fair, or holy, which is interesting that she's a wraith, so kind of ghost-like. She's considered the goddess of poetry and inspiration, and the owner of the Cauldron of Transfiguration.
That's so cool. Caradwen. I'm just wondering, because Caradwen and Caradwen and Nuala, they're both half shadow. I wonder if they've hooked up with Asriel's shadows.
I mean, why not?
Right? I'm just saying.
Or with Asriel.
Like, are they daddy shatty? Like, no. That didn't work.
No, it did not.
And I still like Daddy Azzy.
I love Daddy Azzy.
Oh, Daddy Azzy's where it's at. Everyone loves a Daddy Azzy. That's amazing, though. I love the history of both those names and everything. And
any of her names are so unique and so interesting. They do make you start to question me. Why did you pick Asriel? Like, what is that all about? And so I think that she didn't choose Henry and John for a reason. It makes me feel like she wanted us to look deeper.
Yes, look deeper.
I try hard enough. Do you know how hard it is to be a Taylor Swift fan and a Sarah J. Maas fan? I have to look so deep all the time.
Yes.
Everything's an Easter egg, and I can't live this life anymore, but I want to.
Everything is an Easter egg.
Everything's an Easter egg. I love it.
His code name's Jackal. He's an exceptional assassin.
Streaming now on Peacock.
He will kill again, unless we stop him.
Academy Award winner Eddie Redmayne.
You're paying me to kill him. I am charging you for getting away.
The Jackal's here. Look at the exits.
BAFTA Award winner Lashana Lynch.
I will find him, and I will kill him myself. I like to win.
So do I.
The Day of the Jackal. Streaming now, only on Peacock.
Amy and I've both puzzled over the last name Sarah J. Maas chose for Farrah. That is Archeron. Turns out there's some more mythology to that than Amy and I were like, she's an archer. This is genius. Like, we didn't realize.
Well,
or lazy.
And I do think that is like the very baseline. Like, it's a connection. Like, it is. I mean, Feyre is the archer. Like, what are you going to do about it?
Pointy arrows.
I think it's a very human name. The Prithian names tend to be very unique and make you make these references. But this one is kind of subtle, which I really like. All right, Erica's going to go into it, but I just thought it was quite subtly human.
It is, which is interesting that you bring up. I did not make that connection, but it's, I think, based on the Acheron River, the River of Sorrow in Greek mythology. It's the river of the underworld. We usually think of the river Styx and Stygian, but that's Roman, not Greek. And I think that, spoilers, this is going to kind of tie in a little bit with Crescent City and the fact that you have to cross the Acheron to get to the underworld. You must pay a ferryman or a Charon. Yeah. And it's watched over by psychopomps who report back to Hades, or in this case, what's his name? Not the Bone Carver. The Underking.
Oh, yeah.
And it just this whole thing just reeks to me of the Bone Quarter in Crescent City.
But you can also see it as Hades and Persephone following the river. And the transformation that that she takes to go from one world to the other.
Well, right. That's true.
And when you think about Hades and Persephone being Rhys and Feyre, it almost makes me wonder if that's the reason why the name Archeron did not come into the picture until Mist and Fury.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Sarah, did you just not remember to name her? What's going on? And because that would have been such a clue of what was coming to bring in Greek mythology into this.
And so I had started reading book 2. I had started reading that when she already had this up. And so I was like, Archeron. I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And I thought, I wondered what that name was. And so, yeah, I definitely agree. It's that connection.
How dare we ever question Sarah's motives?
It's like the Fabergé egg of Easter eggs.
It's the Fabergé of Easter eggs, yeah. It's nice.
So Jack and I, as we mentioned before we started recording, we're preparing for season 3 where we're doing Wings and Ruin. And we've been doing a lot of thinking and speculation on this novel. And one of the things that we talk about is Vassa. Do you have any insight based on your research about Vassa's character?
Oh, I do.
You do?
Initially, when I was doing this, Vassa was not on my radar because, again, I was like, this is a weird name. That's not a real thing. I doubted. And that was wrong of me. So Vasilisa is the full name. Vassa is the pet name of Vasilisa, which is Russian, meaning chief, master, king, lord, patron, kingly, royal. So Vasilisa the Beautiful is a retelling of Cinderella with a little bit of Hansel and Gretel thrown in. And the name is associated with the princess because of its frequent use in Russian fairy tales. Vasilisa the Beautiful or the Wise is a stock character in Russian fairy tales. Unlike other fairy tale heroines who wait to be rescued, Vasilisa often accomplishes a series of tasks to help her defeat the villain of the story.
Wow, that sounds so familiar.
Yeah. But so basically with Vasilisa the Beautiful, she has 2 horrible stepsisters, and she works really hard, and again, it's this idea that she is the long-suffering martyr. Her father loses his fortune at sea, and then basically they all live in this cramped little house because they've, gone away from the father, and she has to, go in and look for a place to stay because they cast her out. And that's when she finds the witch Baba Yaga, who, just for your listeners, is said to have chicken legs. So she would be a perfect candidate for the sexy chicken lingerie shop.
Oh my God.
She would be the number 1 model.
Yeah, Baba Yaga.
Number 1 model. Baba Yaga very much is, is the template for Baba Yellowlegs in the Throne of Glass series. And basically, she is another one of 3. We've been talking about this rule of 3 and this showing up of 3 deities. You see that in Hecate, you see that, and that's Greek. You see that with the Norns and the Morai and the Fates, which come from all over. There's a Welsh version, one of them meaning flowered face. Like, it's just very clear that Sarah J. Maas is basing the sisters off of this idea of the triple-faced goddess. It's really interesting. Baba Yaga is also one of those, but is very much always considered the villain. Now, as far as her Firebird tendencies, we have some pretty obvious connections in the musical world with Stravinsky's Firebird, but also a lot of mythology speaks of a Firebird as a magical and prophetic glowing or burning bird from a faraway land, which is both a blessing and a harbinger of doom to its captor, which could be interesting for when we get to Kokeshi the Deathless. So Vasa is confined to this lake, which is actually a German and Russian folklore situation with the stolen veil and Swan Lake.
Because I feel like SJM definitely is setting up Vasa for more. There's just so much there that she hasn't even touched on. So I wonder if it's going to end up being like a mirror / opposite to Farah's story, since you're just kind of giving their
but you can really
there.
see that she's as we talked about, foreshadowing with these little Easter eggs. She's giving you something to look forward to and to think through, and you can read you can read the novel with the idea of I think this will happen in the end, and that either creates suspense or even a bigger surprise. It's a really nice way to use tropes to encourage the reader.
I did look because I know that on fans' minds is what deal did Papa Archeron strike? Yeah. And there is nothing, because I looked in almost every iteration of either Swan Lake or Firebird Legend or Kokeshi the Deathless, and there's no mention of a deal. And I'm really fascinated now to be okay, well, what was it?
You mentioned Koshé, and I think it was really important. We knew we want to talk about it because in our lives, Erica, you always bring in Koshé. You're like, Koshé reference. And it was this is a guy? What's going on here? So there's a lot of questions in the ACOTAR world, and we suspect we're going to see more of him in the future. According to your research, he seems to appear everywhere. What are some of the highlights of all the references to the death god that you've identified?
Yes. So first of all, it comes to us in Ukrainian folklore predominantly. It does show up some in Moldova and Transylvania and a little bit in Russia, which is interesting. And I'm going to try to get this quick and dirty, which is exactly how Caroline likes it. And
Hey!
But yeah, actually, that's very true.
No one's mad at that. I like it.
No one's mad at that.
I have things to do, people. I'm a busy person.
Kosheki comes from this historical figure in Kumanian folklore, at which he's more of a legend, but based on a true man, right? Oh. His name is Khan Kobayak. And so basically he was this really masterful Khan of the Kumanians, and they were displaced both by Western Europe and as well by the Mongols. And so he was this warrior leader who helped get their land or helped find a place for them to settle. Because of this, he's often vilified in a lot of the Western folklore, but then praised a whole lot in the Slavic folklore because he has come in and made this homeland. He is a conqueror. He has this immense love of gold. And of course, he marries a Western princess as a part of this pact to get his land back. So the epithet the Immortal, or Kokeshi the Deathless, is a reference to Konchak's longevity. It is said in a lot of the folklore that Kosheki hides his soul in different things, like a Matryoshka doll, like something inside of something inside of something inside of something.
That's going to be how they get Vasa out somehow, is like they're going to find his soul somewhere.
In the black box that Elaine sees in her visions.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Here it is.
Damn.
See, history helps you foreshadow.
Yeah.
It's worth it.
The box, or whatever it is, because sometimes it's like a turducken of things, I kid you not, but it's hidden under the roots of a tree, which I think is going to come into play at some point. Koshi serves as an allegorical personification of evil that never is truly defeated and always seeks to return once more. And it originates from an unknown source, which I think is pretty true of what we see from the death gods in general. Most famously, we have Stravinsky's Firebird, right? And the ballet centers on the journey of our hero, Prince Ivan. And while returning in the forest, he strays into the magical realm of the evil Kasheki the Immortal, whose immortality is preserved by keeping his soul in this magic egg hidden in a casket in this retelling, which, again, could be that black box.
Black box.
Sometimes it's in a lake under a tree, sometimes a needle in an egg. I think we might see more of a Horcruxy situation. And I know
I was just about to
I've been thinking Horcrux.
Yeah, for sure.
Elaine is the soul.
I think so, too.
Oh, I didn't think it, but now.
Oh, no, I think that's where people are, like, she's so, like you have said many a times, people think she's the weak one, but she is very much shown that she's not. I think she has the fortitude, and I think Koshi is going to try to abduct her. And I think that's his plan for her, is that he is going to use her to hide his soul. And I think that's going to be fascinating. I'm so freaking ready. So ready.
Wow.
And Lucian being friends with Vasa brings that all together.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's continue, because that is...
Yes. Mind-blowing, right?
Yeah.
So Ivan chases and captures the Firebird and is about to kill her. And when she begs for her life, he spares her. As in a token of thanks, she offers him an enchanted feather that he can use her to summon her if he is in dire need. Prince Ivan then meets 13 princesses who are under the spell of Koshi and falls in love with one of them, who's named Tsarevna. The next day, Ivan confronts the magician, and eventually they begin quarreling. When Koshi sends his minions after Ivan, he summons the Firebird. She intervenes, bewitching the monsters and making them dance an elaborate and energetic dance called the Infernal Dance. So basically, they dance until they die, which is a lot of themes in a lot of fairy books, right?
Yes.
So exhausted, the creatures and Koshi then fall into a deep sleep. While they sleep, the Firebird directs Ivan to a tree stump where the casket with the egg containing Koshi's soul is hidden. Ivan destroys the egg, and with the spell broken, the magical creatures that Koshi has held captive, all 13 freaking princesses, are freed, and the palace disappears. All of the real beings, including the princesses, awaken, and with one final hint of the Firebird's music and magic, they celebrate their victory.
That's amazing.
So you have here an excerpt from A Court of Silver Flames that we thought might be worth reading that relates to this story of Koshchei. The sorcerer who imprisoned you is named Koshchei? Is he the bone carver's brother? He mentioned a brother to me once, a fellow true mortal and a death lord. Koshchei is no mere sorcerer. He's confined to the lake only due to an ancient spell, because he was outsmarted once. Everything he does is to free himself. The others who sold me to him, not through their own devices, but by words he whispered on the winds. Koshchei is as old as the sea, older. Some say death itself. They call him Koshchei the Deathless, for he has no death awaiting him. He is truly immortal.
Such a good quote with knowing all more about Koshchei and everything. It hits hard.
Yeah, we're going to leave that on a Dickensian cliffhanger, as Caroline educated me, at least.
It is the Dickensian cliffhanger.
What cliff? Which book? I'm going to have to look into that later.
It was actually in his So he started writing not books, but the stories that would be done chapter by chapter. And one of his first stories that was in these magazines had a character hanging from a cliff.
Oh, I love it.
And I love that. I wish I could remember the name of it. I'm sorry.
I feel like this episode has been a series of fun facts. Yeah, I hope every listener just walks away now and just is like,
wow.
I have, like, you are armed with fun facts now. There is, like, no excuse.
You're ready.
If you go into a party and you don't know anyone, we have provided so many fun facts for you. Just start a conversation with a stranger. Just go up to them and be like, have you heard about firebirds?
You can reference Slavic folklore. You can go Greek mythology. You can talk about the Welsh rulers of the 12th century. Have at it.
This was the very tip of the iceberg. Like, so much more exists. So much more was in our research that we couldn't fit in. We did not touch biblical references or a whole lot of Crescent City, not to mention Throne of Glass. And what is so interesting to me about Sarah's writing is that it seems to me that she pulls the stories apart and deposits different things across her series, but also across characters. So you get these breadcrumbs, but it's never that direct retelling, which I think is so nice. Yes.
I think you get like a little snippet, and then you have to
work
wait
for it
and see if it's going to pan out to be the same thing. You know, I was talking about it. I texted Erica the other day. I was like, hey, masks, Carnival, Venice. And she was like, no. And I said, no, just wait.
I said, sell me on it. I said, sell me on it.
You said, quote, I've never thought of it that way.
Okay, fine.
In the first novel that you see, the presence of the masks is explained by this party that they were supposed to go to, where they all became equals, and everyone from the Spring Court was invited. And I said, you know, like, Venetian Carnival celebrated during the darkest, most miserable months of winter as like this one shining bright light to look forward to, as something to come together. And I think it's a similar foreboding that we see at the time in which Feyre enters Prythian. But Carnival was a way for them to amuse themselves. And so the striking pageantry and the masks, the beautiful really quickly descended into the brutal. So while it was beautiful to look at, like, quickly it became debaucherous and it became venomous, and there would be duels and drunken violence all over the city. And it was a time of sexual deviancy as well. Masks allowed them to circumvent any kind of rigid social hierarchy. So low-born men could seduce noble women or even men, and the whole world could be turned upside down. Criminals mingled with the saintly, and you never knew who you were with. And so I just was like, who is Tamlin?
Yeah.
Do we know?
No, I mean, that should have been the first red flag.
Should have been. But it wasn't, because it still caught me off guard.
Yeah.
Well, and you guys do such a great job, too, talking in season 1 and season 2 about the masks that all of the characters wear. And
yeah, I don't think it's just Spring Court. I think masks is a very overarching term for how many of them present themselves, both with physical masks and then shape-shifting and shadows.
Well, and not to mention the mask that we see later in Akasif. And I think I think about that, and I think about not the beauty of it, but I think about how much death it brings about. And I also think if that's not like a crossover or a holdover from Throne of Glass and the mask that Aelin is forced to wear, I think about that a lot. But then I also think about, in Scottish history, what they would do before a battle would be summon the armies of the dead. So they would recite their genealogies to summon their ancestors to fight alongside them. And that's always what I think of when they talk about the masks and summoning the armies of the dead. Well, and of course the obvious Tolkien reference, but Tolkien
I was about to say that feels very Tolkien, but I know you're getting that.
Tolkien got it from the Scots.
Well, you know, we're talking about how wonderful Sarah J. Maas is in finding all of these little Easter eggs, but then we've brought in ourselves, we've brought in Dickens, we've brought in Tolkien, we've even brought in J.K. Rowling. And so it is a way to read any kind of literature, you know? It doesn't have to be just the smart smut. It can be
any of it.
If we want to bring in Jim Carrey's 1994 The Mask, too, we can make that connection if we want.
We can make a case.
Yeah. Thank you both so much for joining, for coming on today, and just for doing the sheer amount of research you did. And listener, when I tell you how much we did not cover,
It was a lot.
I really hope that Pithy Chronicles does an episode on just ACOTAR alone, and you're able to like call out all the things that, you know, you weren't able to do today or did do today, because there's just so much that there's there. And thank you so much for taking the time and coming and talking to us about it today.
Yeah, and I think what you've just done, at least for me, is just, I already appreciated Sarah J. Maas. Now I just like worship her.
Yeah. I was going to say, is there a little bit of a bow?
I feel like I'm standing.
She's a mastermind.
She is a mastermind. I just, I feel like she's a giant and I am a small being in front of her.
It really is one of those moments where, you know, before I used to tell people like, oh, ACOTAR, it's a really good series. And then we started looking into it. You're like, this is a really good series and she's a good writer. And then we just did this conversation. I'm like, am I ever going to be a decent writer? Will I ever have this? Like, she's phenomenal. She is so well read, not just in literature, but in history. So I feel good talking with you guys as a person, but I feel bad as a writer.
I feel like I need to just give up now.
I know. I'm just like, I'm going to go turn on the History Channel, curl up, and just hope something sticks.
No, do not turn on the History Channel. Turn on the Pithy Chronicle.
Yes,
because the History Channel gets it wrong.
I will say that one of the things that we've been talking about with our podcast is making history accessible and fun and getting people to recognize that these historical tales, I mean, they're not just treaties and dates. We're talking sex, scandal, incest a lot. It is my favorite subject. Kidnapping, sorcery.
So can you please let our listeners know where they can find you? Tell us your Instagram, your TikTok, all of it.
So we are the Pithy Chronicle on Instagram, and we are the Pithy Chroniclers on TikTok. We put out new episodes every Monday. You can get them anywhere you get your podcasts. We usually post an update every Monday with the link to our episodes. And so you can find our show notes too.
We cover anything and everything. Like, we're doing Hawaiian monarchy this week and discussing how they were descended from the gods.
What? That sounds
so cool.
Yes,
it's super cool. And how they felt that brother-sister relationships were the best way to get a noble birth.
Sounds like the Targaryens.
You know, and as we all know, it's all about uncle niece. All right, that's where it's at. As House of Dragon.
We've covered at least 3 different niece-uncle relationships that I can think of.
And did they thrive? Because they clearly don't on House of Dragon.
No.
Okay.
They do not. It is... House of Dragons, too, is steeped in history.
Yeah.
Yes. All of George R. R. Martin's works are. Yeah.
No, it really is. That would be a fun one, too.
So, I mean, if this didn't pitch people to go listen, I mean, genuinely, like this, I love the topics you both cover. It is unique. It's not something you hear everywhere else. It's not like everything else is so oversaturated. So, you know, not only do you guys bring unique history, but you guys are a blast. You're just hilarious. You're fun.
We love doing this. This was so much fun. And it was a new world for me to introduce ACOTAR to my, radar.
We're always glad to make another convert of someone.
Uh-huh.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this special episode of Book Talk for Book Talk. We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform.
As we gear up for Season 3, where we will deep dive into a court of wing and ruin, we will continue to share between-season thoughts, interviews, and exclusive content.
We would love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. You can submit your comments to our form at booktalkforbooktalk.com for a chance to have your feedback discussed during a weekly mini-episode.
If you are enjoying the podcast, visit our website, booktalkforbooktalk.com, to view our latest merch and to learn about supporting the show through Patreon, Ko-Fi, or Venmo.
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because you know I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like, my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.